Hello and welcome back to Adam's Fam Anime. I am John and today I'm going to be reviewing One Piece chapter 1027, titled Danger Beyond Imagining. Now, I should start this chapter review by stating that it will be a bit shorter than most, only because there isn't a whole lot that goes on in this chapter. Rather, we get a good amount of dialogue and a little bit of mystery setup towards the end. So while the detailed breakdown of the chapter won't be as long, this time I'll try to focus a little bit more on the dialogue and what might be to come for the next few chapters. Alright, now without further delay, we can go ahead and get started with the beginning of this chapter, which is a request cover page. And this one's alright, only because we don't really get a whole lot of request cover pages that involve Roger. But this one is of him running from a lion with a huge smile on his face, and this is after he just tagged up that lion's face with a marker. I mean, for a request cover page, this one's pretty good. It is entertaining, but I'll stand by my previous statement that I would much prefer a cover story rather than request cover pages. I mean, I'm sure that the main writing part of Wano at least has to be fairly close to being wrapped up, at the very least to the point where it doesn't require too much time, attention, and effort to set up the fights and the events that are going on for the remainder of Wano. However, there are still some cover stories that we could address, we could pick back up on, or even some main storylines that we could address in a cover story. For example, what happened at Reverie. I understand that that could be a very important reveal at some point in the very near future, but at the same time, maybe we can slow play it and get, a page-to-page breakdown of what occurred, or at least the buildup of what occurred, and then have that cover story culminate around the time that Wano finishes up and the Straw Hat Pirates typically get their news updates of what's going on in the world while they've been involved in their current conflict. Well, in any case, that's just some wishful thinking on my part. But to get into the chapter, it starts off with us checking back in on the rooftop and seeing what is going down between Luffy, Momonosuke, Yamato, and Kaido. Now, it appears that Yamato has taken some serious damage from that Thunder Bagua. I mean, anytime you see a character bleeding out of their head, it typically means that they are either down and out or on the way to being down and out. Now, we do get a few panels of Luffy telling Momonosuke to man up, more or less, and Momonosuke telling him that that's not an instantaneous process. Now, I'm not really certain that Luffy is just trying to egg Momonosuke on into accomplishing his task, but it almost seems like a backslide from the previous chapter. I mean, Momonosuke really hasn't had an opportunity to show any fear before Luffy makes that statement. In any case, Kaido tries to stop Yamato and Momonosuke from escaping the scene, and while riding upon Momonosuke's back, Yamato blocks an attack from Hybrid Kaido that attempts to stop them from moving. And after getting a short callback to Kiku and Kinemon's sacrifice, Momonosuke shows his apprehension and fear again of heights in particular when he refuses to immediately jump off and escape from Kaido. Now, when Kaido goes out for a second attack, we see that Luffy grabs him around the neck with his legs and gets the insta-bond moment with Yamato before Momonosuke jumps off. And it's then that Yamato gives Momonosuke a dragon flying lesson of sorts. And then immediately following a little bit of exposition about how flame clouds work, we get another recap of what's going to happen or what Momonosuke needs to do to prevent the crushing and or bombing of the Flower Capital with the fall of Onigashima. And believe it or not, that brief summary and recap covers more than, or roughly 70% of the chapter. The only other thing that I would need to touch base with in regards to this previous pages mentioned is that Kaido is noticeably growing weaker, or at the very least has been weakened to the point to where he can no longer control his flame clouds with relative ease. And the only other thing worth mentioning is that Momonosuke and Yamato have realized from Oden's journal that the clash that split the clouds is something noteworthy and symbolic of the fact that Luffy, aside from Big Mom of course, is the only one capable of taking down Kaido at this point. So ultimately, nothing really new in the first half of the chapter, just a good amount of exposition on things that we already knew and kind of could have assumed on our own. Now, the last half of this fight seemed to be dedicated towards Zoro and King, but not in the exciting way that most One Piece fans probably anticipated. Now, I can't be certain, but it would seem that we get a reveal of King's hybrid form, or maybe at the very least one of his hybrid forms. He appears to have transformed his arms into his dinosaur wings and is using them to create slash attacks in a rapid succession form, and it appears that he's doing this aimlessly and carelessly as he's managed to hit Queen and is breaking the weapons and even causing physical harm to some of his own men. Now, it would appear that the frenzied attacks are coming as a response of Zoro cutting King's mask. And it is there that we get the announcement that no one has seen King's face. Now, in this rage-filled barrage, it appears that King has Zoro on the defensive and even manages to push him through a wall. And luckily for him, none other than Franky is there to catch him. Franky offers his help to assist Zoro, who of course turns it down. So after Franky graciously steps aside, we get a named move from King called Imperial Archer, where he rushes Zoro while still in his hybrid form, attacking with the hardness of his wings. Zoro counters this named attack with one of his own, this one being Ultra Tiger Hunt. The force from King's attack seems to have a little bit of an effect on Zoro, at least damage-wise, but in any case it pushes them both outside of the live floor and outdoors, away from the remainder of the fighting groups. And then we get a little bit of dialogue, minimalist type of dialogue, in regards to Zoro wanting to die by the sword and asking for some respect, and King also asking for some respect. Now, my assumption in this is that King does not want his face to be revealed, but obviously we get a small tidbit of the facial reveal. And when I say small, that is pretty much exactly what I mean, as in we only get to see his hair color, which in black and white could be anything, but for the most part we can tell it is light colored hair. And so with all of that, that concludes the chapter. I mean, if I had to put it all into words very quickly, Momonosuke still getting over his fears, Luffy and Kaido are now one-on-one, and Zoro and King are now outdoors fighting one-on-one. And we might get King's face revealed. And literally that is the gist of the chapter. Alright, and now on to my ratings portion of the video, which I won't dilly-dally about. And as always, we start off with the artwork portion of the ratings, and I'm going to give that a 7 for this chapter. I mean, really, it's nothing special. We don't really get any immaculately drawn panels like we have been getting for the past few chapters. I will say that the panel involving King, or at least the very last panel with his face in it, is pretty well drawn. And then we get a couple of dragon drawings of Momonosuke, which are fairly detailed. But ultimately, it's really nothing special in terms of artwork. I mean, especially towards the end when we get the fight between Zoro and King, it seems like a lot of the panels were really just phoned in and not really given too much attention to detail. And next, we'll be moving on to the story portion of the ratings, and for this one, I'm going to give it a 5. And that may seem low, but I can go ahead and explain why I gave it so low for this chapter. I mean, we virtually learn nothing new. I mean, the only thing that we know for sure that is new about this chapter is that no one has seen King's face. But aside from that, I can't help but think that throughout this entire chapter, I kept saying to myself, I know that already. I know that already. And aside from all the repeat exposition that we got, the only other thing of relevance is that we're learning that Kaido is starting to weaken, or at least his control over the flame clouds are. So it puts more of a time constraint, or the usual X amount of minutes before doom that we've typically been getting during these post time skip fights. And I know that during my entire time I've been operating this channel and reviewing One Piece that this is the lowest story rating that I've given to a chapter review, but trust me, it's well earned for this one. Part of my ratings portion, I'm going to discuss the hype, which is only going to get a 6 from me in this chapter. And as per usual, I'll go ahead and mention that anytime we get a good amount of fighting, I'm going to at least give the hype a 5. And the fighting between Zoro and King managed to carry majority of the hype for this chapter, as we've seen a lot of the same stuff from Kaido, Luffy, Momonosuke, and Yamato at this point. And the only reason that I moved the hype up to a 6 for this chapter is because we're starting to get the King face reveal, even though that's not something we actually got for this chapter. And I suppose there may be some reason for Oda to hang on to the facial reveal, but I just feel like that could have solved a lot of the narrative issues that we had with the rushed feel of this chapter. Now, with the average of all 3 of those ratings, that gives us the Adams Fam review and overall rating for chapter 1027 of One Piece to a whopping 6. I mean, ultimately, this chapter just really wasn't my cup of tea. I mean, we do get a little bit of action, a little bit of setup, but for the most part, it's just kind of a run-of-the-mill chapter for me, which we haven't gotten a whole lot of in Wano. So I suppose this one instance is more than forgivable. And we also didn't get any salt rubbed into the wound by getting an announcement that there would be a break next week, so at least there's that to look forward to. And now for a little discussion. At the very least, we can be happy that Luffy is finally one-on-one v Kaido, give or take the unimpressive fact that Kaido's been weakened by so many people before Luffy can get back up there and face off against him. And to be quite honest, I was hoping that this fight between Luffy and Kaido, or this victory on Luffy's behalf at the very least, would kind of end the argument about whether or not Luffy is a Yonko. And I can't help but think that a lot of the fan base is still going to be split about this decision until we get the conclusion of Big Mom's events. Now, I'm sure that Luffy would not care about sharing the credit or sharing the glory of the defeat with his crewmates, but there's already been a lot of contention about him being the 5th Yonko, and if Kaido's out of the way, and so many people help participate in taking Kaido down, then I suppose we'll just have to leave that matter unsettled until we reach Shanks at some point. And also, not to take away from Zoro in any way, shape, or form, but I'm kind of surprised to see him having so much trouble with King. I mean, I'm totally not trying to take away from King's credit or King's just dues, but after you go toe-to-toe with multiple Yonkos and show an exhibit of Conqueror's Haki going up against Kaido, and then we get the implication from Zoro that King is strong enough to kill him, and if he does do so, he should do it with a blade. I mean, there's a good deal that we still need to understand about this whole fight between Zoro and King, or at least how it is being played out in the way that it is. And I'm also curious about the reveal for King's face and why it seems to be so important. I mean, from the slight reveal that we got in this chapter, it doesn't seem that he really has any kind of off or unique appearance. I'm sure that he probably will when we get the entire reveal, but I'm just curious as to why Oda didn't just go ahead and give us that this chapter. I mean, really the only thing that I can think of that might make it a little more edgy or kind of eyebrow raising is if his appearance is similar to someone that we've already seen in this series, like NL or someone else who we haven't come across in quite some time. Just food for thought, I suppose, but I guess we can also mention that we won't be seeing, or most likely won't be seeing, Momonosuke or Yamato meeting up with the Alliance or the Straw Hats until after Onigashima has been spared from falling on or blowing up the Flower Capital. And I suppose this is fine because it might just mean that Kaido can give Luffy his full attention once he realizes that Momonosuke is now lifting the clouds instead of him. And I'm not 100% sure why, but I get the feeling that this fight can't really be concluded between Kaido and Luffy until after the situation with Onigashima and the Flower Capital has been resolved. In any case, that's going to do it for this week's chapter review, seeing as how there isn't a whole lot to talk about or to discuss in regards to this week's events. So if you guys have anything you wanted to discuss or to talk about, leave it in the comment section down below. Also, if you guys enjoyed the content, please like, share, and subscribe. That would help me out greatly. My name is John. I'm from Adams Fam Anime, and I'll see you guys in the next video.